I'm Carla with Race to Walk, and these are just some thoughts on a Sunday. And what I do in these weekly updates is just share a few thoughts, and I also give an update on where we're at in helping some Afghan Christians in their immigration journey. And so, normally on my channel, what I have done is I have do Bible study videos and also talk about books. But when I got involved with this, I started helping my friend Mark Ritchie with his Bible studies he was doing via Zoom in Pakistan. He's been doing those Bible studies since 2020, and I started helping him in 2021 with Pakistani's women's Bible studies. Spoke at a few conferences and just kind of joined in on Mark's Bible studies whenever he happened to send me a link and I was available. And then last year in October 2022, things took a little bit of a different turn. I covered for some of his Afghan Bible studies, and they were some concerns about being deported from Pakistan back to Afghanistan came up, and so one thing led to another. So when that happened, it had already been a little challenging getting uh, the same level of videos out that I did with when I started doing the Bible studies also in Pakistan, because my Bible studies with them would be like a different topic in a different format than the ones I was doing on my YouTube channel. Um, and then when the whole immigration thing added in, then it was really like time I was already busy before, and so adding this on top of that um, was a whole lot of time. I realized how crazy it was when I was looking at like World Relief has an office in Dallas, and they help 80 families in or 80 people relocate in a year. I have more than that. I'm like one person. So anyway, so it gets a little crazy. So that's what I normally do. But the connection between all of those things is that, the Bible isn't just a bunch of words. It's not just even supposed to be thoughts. It's supposed to have an impact, right? We're supposed to be the good news. We're supposed to be the product demonstration of the Holy Spirit working within us. And so that should bear fruit. This It was James, let's see, 2:26. Actually wrote this down today. This is just as the which one is it? As a body without spirit is dead, so faith is also dead without works. So what we do is supposed to be evidence of the Holy Spirit working within us. And so um, also in James, this is in James 1:27. So pure and genuine religion in the sight of God is and the Father means caring for the orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. So we are supposed to be caring for those in need if we're really um, seeking after God and following His heart, right? So what we do should reflect what we think. And so that's kind of the connection between my Bible studies, what the Word says, books, how we integrate these other ideas that are out there in with what the Bible says and what it is that we're doing. Mark brought in this effort that we're doing now, Mark brought in his friend Don Shire, who has a ministry at DonShireMinistries.org. And Don will, since he already has a nonprofit that has been doing ministry all over the world, he has a channel set up for sending money into other countries. And so any donations made at DonShireMinistries.org, when you select Race to Walk, that will go to help our people if you'd like to help them. So anyway, the topic of today's stream. So missed opportunities. And I had kind of been on my mind, like, oh yeah, I think this is, and I do pray about like, well, what should I name the stream, and try to think about like how does what has been going on tie into the topic of the stream. And I was pretty sure yesterday this is what I was I mean, I knew that this is what I was going to do yesterday, but then this morning we get into Bible study and we're in the book of Mark. And I was like, yes, this is exactly it. So, one of the things that was kind of interesting, I did a live stream, or not a live stream, I did a video review of the Sound of Freedom movie. There's actually connections to what we're doing here with the Afghans in Pakistan to that movie. And someone made a comment on there, because I give some personal accounts of some connections with all of this, to tie it all together. And really the topic of that stream is what is truth, because the Sound of Freedom absolutely is not truth. And so that was the topic of that review. But somebody said, well, you're just being self-aggrandizing, because I'm giving personal accounts of things I personally know. That's called a first-hand testimony, right? First-hand witness. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, well, as I was telling the accounts I gave in that story, I'm like, yeah, I have actually been involved in some pretty amazing stuff. I mean, and I didn't go seeking it out, honestly. The editor-in-chief of An Unexpected Journal, we were having a discussion about this, so things that we get involved in. And she said, I'm very intentional about things I get involved in, and she's an extrovert. So she goes seeks things out. I don't. Things come find me because I'm an introvert, and I would much rather just sit and read and write rather than go and interface with people. So every single thing that I've gotten involved in, other than joining the apologetics program at Houston Christian University, that is the only thing that I personally sought out. Everything else found me. It was a friend asked me for help, and I helped them. And so when I was thinking about that comment, I can see, and I mean, it's just the tone of it was just all, and I'm thinking, you know what? It's not my fault that your life is boring and you have done nothing of value with your life. That's not my problem. I'm not going to apologize for the things I've done that have been this is just objectively true. I've been involved in some pretty awesome things. And so, and again, it's not about me. It's just somebody asked me for help and I said yes. So the question is, did you miss the opportunity to be involved in something that was awesome? Because I don't believe that I'm unique in having these opportunities that open up or come across my path. I think probably everybody does, but not everybody will step up and put their time into helping someone else. And we make that choice. And so your choice of spending your time just on your own personal stuff has led to a different place in your life than other people who are out there being willing to do something that's not only concerned about them. So opportunities come up all the time. We have a choice about what it is that we do with those opportunities. We can say yes or we can say no. And the interesting thing about the lesson with Mark, because what I've been thinking about is the difference between Saul and David as the kings of Israel and Judah. So Saul was king of Israel, right? There was nothing that he did on his own that got him in that position. He was anointed by God. He was chosen by God. But he never really felt like he was worthy of it, right? He had some insecurity problems. And the reality is that he wasn't. I mean, there was nothing. God had something in him, and he could have been a good king. Otherwise, God wouldn't have chosen him to begin with. But he was afraid of other people's opinions. He never got past that insecurity. He lost the kingship because he didn't obey God, and he took the position that he didn't wait for Samuel to come and make the offering. He went out of God's will, right? And so Saul told him that the kingdom would be taken from him, and so he went and anointed David because Saul was concerned about his position. He was responding to peer pressure, whereas David, he was anointed by God, right? Told he was going to be king when he was young, so probably in his teens, but he didn't step into that position until years later, and he had to go through a training and a seasoning period before he actually took the throne. So Saul was just kind of launched into it, got it like right away. There was no trial period for him. There was nothing that he had to go through ahead of time, whereas David did. And you see that even with his when he fought Goliath, because he said, God was with me when I killed the lion and the bear, when he was just a kid, right? And so he knew that God would be with him when he killed Goliath. And so he put his trust in God. And he knew that he had to, like, whatever he did, he had to put his trust in God. I'm not saying that David didn't mess up, because he did. He did mess up quite a few times in a lot of things. David's family was really a mess. But then he went through years and years in exile on the run from Saul. And so he had to, when you read the Psalms, I think most of them were were written during a time when he was in probably great distress and worried and thinking he's not going to be able to get through this. And he's reminding himself of the goodness of God, that God, not only is it a reminder to him, but it's a proclamation of God's goodness, that God is faithful and he will see him through it, regardless of what it looks like, to see him, of what it would come like. But, he believed God would do what he said. The other person, like Gideon, Israel was being oppressed by the Philistines, and an angel appeared to Gideon while he was grinding grain in this wine press. So he's there hiding out in this wine press, and the angel says to him, "Hail, mighty warrior." That was not what Gideon was at the time, but it was what God knew he could be, right? So he said, this is not who you are. You can be something beyond this. And Gideon did test God a few times. He did lead the Israelites to victory. And actually, when I did the conference in the Bible set in Pakistan, it was a pastor's conference. It was 500 pastors, and my topic was on the mighty few, Gideon's army, and the Battle of San Jacinto. Because if you ever read the story about the Battle of San Jacinto in Texas, it's like sounds just like really similar to Gideon's battle too. But Gideon had this victory, and he became this national hero. And the thing is, Gideon thought he was nothing, right? God said, "No, you can be more than this. You can be a warrior." And he believed him for that, and he was, but he didn't continue to trust in God. He got full of himself, because he basically put himself in the role of sort of kind of this priest as king. And if you read the story about what came after that big battle, you'll see that Gideon had some another family mess, and it led to national strife. But going on to Mark, what was really interesting was, let's see if all these came up. I don't have a lot of slides today. Mark, so the Gospel of Mark was written by John Mark. He was not an apostle, but he was a friend of Peter's. And the Gospel of Mark is Peter's account of Jesus' life. And there's debate about everything related to the Bible, but there's a lot of debate about the dating of Mark. And so, there's a couple of videos on Mike Lacona's channel. There's a guy that actually graduated from the same apologetics program that I did, that he did his thesis on the dating of Mark. It's basically looking at all, pretty much the consensus of scholars. So any scholar that had, I can't remember what his criteria was, but the majority of scholarship believes that Mark was written before 70 AD. And he just kind of gives like the numbers and, what it is that on the dating that people believe about the Gospel of Mark. I took a class from Nabil Qureshi. He is the author of, he used to work for Ravi Zacharias Ministries, and he wrote Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, also No God But One. He was a former Muslim. His his autobiography or spiritual memoir is Seeking All of Finding Jesus. But I took a class from him about 6 months before he passed. This was in 2017. He had come to Houston because he had stomach cancer, and that's what he ended up passing away from. And he was in the middle of doing his dissertation on the Gospel of Mark. So the class I took from him was on Islam and Christianity, doing a comparison between the two. And that was a one-time opportunity to be able to do that. And I had a lot of opportunities like that while I was in the apologetics program. It's just time and things that were only one-time opportunities that, somebody going through the program now wouldn't have the opportunity to do. But he said that he believed that the Gospel of Mark was written at 38 AD. He gave some reasons for that. And if you ever read a parallel of the Gospels where you see all the similar passages that are side by side, and keep this in your head, I think you can see it. It makes a lot of sense because sometimes you'll see, if you think about timing, if it was early, then certain people would have been alive and certain people would have been in power. And so it's kind of like, the Christians were under persecution, and you have to be careful about things you say. Like the Gospel of Mark is the one that puts Herod in the greatest or the best light. During the whole discussion about the martyrdom of John the Baptist, it's like they'll say, oh yeah, he didn't really want to do this, and it was really, anyway, making excuses for Herod, where the other Gospels don't. So Matthew and Luke kind of start with the Gospel of Mark, and then they kind of build their own story off of that. But what was interesting about the discussion today is that depending on when you think it was written, so when it was written isn't dependent on what we think, but when it was written kind of tells a story. It tells different stories because Mark was let me see if I have it. That was the wrong one. Paul took Mark on his first missionary journey. And this is around 46 to 48 AD, that first missionary journey. And so those things, there's a debate over. So the writer of the Gospel of Mark went with Paul on a missionary journey. Okay. So after this, Mark bails on them while they're on their trip. And so then later on, Barnabas, who's also a companion of Paul, I don't have that up there. I did this wrong. Barnabas wants to take them on the second round, and Paul's like, no, we're not going to take him. He flaked out the last time. We're not going to take him again. And so that caused a rift. It was a split, and it's actually referred to as the incident at Antioch. Huge drama in the church. This is recorded in Acts 15. So the question is, does this come before or after this Mark wrote the gospel? And if it's after, then you have Mark was taken on this missionary journey. They were giving him experience on planting churches. He bails. But then you can see there's redemption after, God gave him, he missed out on the second trip, but God gave him an opportunity for redemption later on. And so that's if it's, and he wrote the gospel at some point, right? So that's if the gospel is dated late. But I think if Nabeel Qureshi is right, that tells a totally different story, because Mark would have written it early, right? So 38 AD. And then he writes his gospel. And what Nabeel Qureshi thought his position was that there's a short ending and long ending of Mark. He thinks the Gospel of Mark was written as a evangelistic tool that people would take this, they would go and they would tell the story of Jesus' life. And then at the point where the short ending is, because it ends at the empty tomb, somebody that was a witness, said there were many people who saw the resurrected Jesus, 500 people at one point, at one particular time. And he said he thought that there would be a witness to the physical, resurrected Jesus would come in and tell their story, give their own story at that point. And that the long ending was written later, as when it was mainly, the witnesses started dying off, they just started telling the story just generally. That was his thought about what the origin of Mark was, the purpose, and why his explanation, a likely explanation of the short and long endings. So if you have that, and you have this gospel that's really the first, probably, because Luke says there were many accounts of Jesus's life, but Mark was probably the first. I can't think of what to compare it to, but the first significant account given weight, right? Not weight, but not that they wouldn't have considered the other ones, but like bestseller status, basically. And so Mark would have been kind of like the golden child, and he was young, right, in Christian circles, because he wrote this gospel, Peter's gospel, or Peter's account. So if it was written around 38 AD, and then a few years later, he's taken on this missionary journey with Paul and Barnabas. This is like really big status, and then he bails. And Paul doesn't trust him anymore. And it says in this account, it's like they said that he actually did go back and he founded some churches. So it wasn't like that was the end for him. But it's another thing where I think a situation like with Paul, there was no seasoning ahead of time. He was catapulted into this celebrity status in the Christian church, and he didn't stand up, right? So you have to continue to stand firm. That's the thing. You have to continue to walk in the faith and not get so full of yourself that you think that you're beyond being able to fall. So a few months ago, I was talking about, did a whole series on manipulation. This is back in May. There's, I think, like 4 videos that are live streams that are related to that, like how to identify manipulation, how to identify manipulators. I can't remember what the other ones were, but I was talking about different, identifying manipulation in different areas. Like I was talking about in international relations, talking about Zalmay Khalilzad, who was completely blow smoke, and tries to make it seem like the Taliban are allies and the good guys. He did this again this week. Still more smoke blowing. He's literally, the guy is just delusional. He just, oh my gosh. Zalmay Khalilzad, anytime you hear his name or see an article written by him, know that is a bunch of baloney. He's basically on the side of the Taliban. Taliban are terrorists, sold us out. Anyway, this again. So anyway, I have been talking about that. I've been talking about a personal situation that was a lot of manipulation, and then I was also gave some very specific examples of manipulation and propaganda that was going on locally in our local school board election. So this has been a crazy week in Texas, and we had our much indicted Attorney General, Ken Paxton. And when I say much indicted, he's been under indictment for like security fraud or something for like 8 years. I don't even know where that's at. He's been investigated by the federal government, and the latest thing was he got impeached by the Texas House because he wanted the state to pay off his settlement for, I don't even know which one. I mean, it's hard to keep track of all his indictments. I don't even know. But he had to pay something off. And so There was a judgment against him, and he wanted taxpayers to pay for it. So he's an attorney general. Cheating and stealing is not part of your job description as a state attorney general. Anyway, so that this was all going on, and he goes to he's in a trial in the Senate, the Texas Senate, to see if they remove him. Dan Patrick, our lieutenant governor, is over the trial, and I mentioned a few months ago that, I don't know, maybe it hasn't been that long, but somebody donated $3 million to Patrick's campaign. Never had that large of a donation before, but it was a Paxton supporting PAC. So basically, you consider that a bribe. So what I would call a bribe to Patrick, or to structure the trial to favor Paxton. So they had a vote yesterday, and it's so clear. Like, there was no question about Paxton's a crook. He was turned in by his own staff members because he was getting all of these. He has a backer that he basically manipulated things to benefit. And then into all of this mess is a mistress. And oh, by the way, Ken Paxton's wife is a Texas senator. So anyway, it's a whole big mess. I mean, you couldn't even write a story about this because it's just unbelievably, ridiculously corrupt. No one would believe it, but this is Texas. So anyway, they voted yesterday, and basically it went down party lines, and the Texas is controlled by the Republican Party. They're pretty much all sold out, and they didn't remove him. There's no question that he's guilty. There's no question about it. But because they're friends, they are, we were actually talking about this in Bible study, because all of this tribalism, they acquitted him and he's still there. So one of the things that they were saying, that in one of the articles, not this one, I'm going to have a couple of articles about this up on the article on my website for this live stream. But the speculation was that the Texas senators, even though they knew Paxton was guilty, they were afraid that the money backing Paxton would come against them, and that they would have a hard time getting reelected. It's like, so what? So what if you have a hard time being elected? When you sell your soul, you don't get to just take it back whenever you want. I mean, you basically lost your integrity. You are backing corruption and evil, and so you'd rather make sure you get elected and stay compromised and corrupt rather than having any integrity. This ties into our school board, because there actually is a connection. There was a lot of drama with the school board this week too. So you go back and watch that. I was explaining there were 3 positions up. There was this one guy who had a lot of community support that the little locus of evil, in my opinion, on the school board had it out for, and this dirty person. I'm not saying any of them are clean, but anyway, the main guy that I think is just really disgustingly corrupt. He had outside money, an outside money PAC coming in and trying to get all 3 of the seats with his people, but specifically he was going against this guy, Robert Scarfo. People have no sense. Like, they more money than sense. FTC violations. They really had all this money. They really didn't know what they were doing, and they were going up against a local guy who really isn't any better ethically, but he does have good connections with local groups. So the guy on the school board is trying to manipulate everything. He could only get one person elected to that seat, and that was an incumbent And he barely even got that person done. So all that money coming in, just basically, it was a waste. It was just because they don't know what they're doing. What I've heard since then is that, so Scarfo's still on the board, that it's that election and the outcome of it has completely changed the dynamics, not only on the board, but also in the district. Because now they see, is most of the people that are on the board now, they're either put there on as part of a slate that this guy kind of coordinated, or they were appointed. And so almost all of them, other than Scarfo, owe their seat on the board to him. And so they would just do what he said. And it was, there have been multiple things over the past year where that's really obvious, that they're really not 7 independent votes on the board. There's basically this one guy, and then Scarfo would vote how he wanted. Everybody else was under this other guy's thumb. But that's not true anymore, because it's obvious that this other guy does not have the control that he has thought he had. So people are questioning more on the board, are questioning more things. They're having their opinion, not necessarily what they're being told to say. And also, it's made a change in the district itself. There was a guy that was telling me that he worked for the district, and he had been getting a lot of harassment because people know that he's not for the guy that's the really dirty guy on the board. So because of that, there would be a lot of retaliation and pressure against him, if he didn't go in line with who this person is. And so now they know he does not have the weight that he thought he did. And why? And what caused all this? It was because Scarfo just didn't go along with their ridiculously corrupt, just the things that they were trying to pull. The irony of this is, Scarfo really is not. He's not. It doesn't cause waves. He doesn't. It's not. He's not like a stand your ground kind of guy in general. I mean, he's just not. Doesn't go along with the corruption, the out and out corruption. If there was a way he could get around it, he probably would have. But the things that they were wanting to do were just completely corrupt. He's like, no, this isn't right. We need to do this in a way. And so that was why they wanted to get rid of him, and they couldn't. And so all Scarfo did was just not go along with the corruption. Wasn't anything hard. He just didn't go along with it, and he just did what he'd always done. He has had strong connections in the community for years. It's FYI for anybody that wants to do something like that. Take a note on that, because he's had a mailing list. This is a thing that just kills me about people that start running for a school board. They show up 2 months before, and then they haven't established any connections. They have no platform, like not platform as in I'm going to do this, and this, but just have any sort of reach at all. And then they complain because they don't win, and they don't have money. You either have to spend a crap ton of money sending things out, or you have to build relationships. And so Scarfo didn't spend a crap ton of money. He just built relationships, and he had an email list. I used to be on it. So that's what you need to do. But it's just now Scarfo he's kind of it's just completely changed. The dynamics have completely changed. And so the people on the Texas Senate have missed an opportunity just to stand up for what's right. They had an opportunity, and all they had to do was just, vote for what was right. And they could have been known as, hey, you know what? I am, it would have been such an easy way to just say, hey, you know what? I am in this party, and I just believe in what's right. And they could have been able to go back to that, and now all they're seen as is a corrupt and sold out tool. And this is another thing we read. This is another class. This is from the Master Life class that we did today, but this is from Job 23:10-12. And he said, so in this, he says, I know the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. So a test is a trial. And so if you want to be prepared for something beyond what it is you're doing, like David was prepared through these times of testing, you have to be willing to come through it. If you're going to cave at the slightest opposition, or when you make somebody mad, you're just a bunch of garbage that is good for nothing other than to be sold out. You have to be willing to stick to it and do what's right and to come through it. So this is, my feet have closely followed his steps. I have kept his way without turning aside. I have not departed from the commands of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread. And I've read that before. I even did a Bible study series on the whole book of Job, but it wasn't until we were reading it this morning that I realized that's what that Texas trial, that's what that verse is talking about. Is that Job is saying, regardless of the threats about my security, my financial security, what's my daily bread, like what's going to allow me to have provisions for myself, regardless of what happens, I value God's word more than that. And those Texas senators that were voting for corruption, it switched for them. They value their daily bread and the short term. I don't even know what gain it would be, but they valuing this a short term, making people. They don't want to stand up against people. They don't want to have somebody coming against them, in their next election, and so they value that more than they value God's word. And most of them claim to be Christians, but how do we know someone is a Christian? It's by their fruit, and it's completely rotten. If you are defending somebody lying, cheating, and stealing, literally, and you're saying that it's okay, you're not serving God, you're serving evil. And this is the same sort of thing that's happening in our local school board. There's a guy that it's a huge mess. More of the same sort of thing we're seeing on a statewide level: lying, cheating, and stealing. all of it is coming up about. It's starting to come out about a particular person, and the discussion blew up. This is the stupidest thing. It's like the school board never learns. Someone goes up and wants to talk about it, saying that it's not right that this district is paying same sort of thing. The issue with Paxton was that was just too much for the Texas House. Was that he wanted the state to pay $3.3 million for the judgment against him. So in the local situation, there's someone that's been put on paid leave, that's been accused of sexual harassment, and the district is, according to what people have said, is paying for his attorney. So they're paying for his defense for the offense that they're investigating him for. So someone was going to be complaining about that, and they get up to talk, and they turn off their mic. It's like, okay, you're dumb. You guys, they never respond anyway, so they should just let them talk and ignore them like they do everybody else. But then they shut them down, and then people get mad, and it's just like all the dirt's coming out. Like they're posting like all over these Facebook groups. It's just all of it, all kinds of, not even just about the district paying for his attorney, but also claiming that he's been embezzling money for years and complaining about the person he's having an affair with, and all of this, all the dirt comes out. But just like the defense for Ken Paxton and his corruption, you see a ton of people, they're like excusing it. Well, what difference does it make? He's a great guy. People excuse it if they're friends with them. So what's right and wrong isn't dependent on who a person knows or who they're friends with. Right and wrong is dependent on justice and righteousness, the nature of God. Like he's a determinant of justice and righteousness, and that is what the word mishpat, if you look that up, it actually is translated as justice or judgment, depending on the context of it. And so our choices determine where we fall on that. It's not our own convenience that determines what's right and wrong. And the other thing that I was thinking about is like, this is why the thing, especially locally, it just seems like there's like no sense, like all this money going into really bad strategy. People picking, like, there'll be outside money basically going in to fund really bad candidates. And part of it is that they're meddling in a community and situations that they don't know. They're not here, but they're meddling in it. But also, the other thing I think is that they're putting their trust in their money, right? They think that because they have more money, that they must know the best thing to do or what's right. And that's a lot of times not true. But because they're putting in their trust in their money, they're easily fooled. You know, they become fools. There's multiple verses that say that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Because they're not fearing God, they're putting their trust in their money, they become fools. And they are. And that's what you see. So anyway, regarding opportunities, we have opportunities every day to stand up and come through the trials or challenges that God puts in front of us. We have opportunities every day to do something for beyond ourselves, right? To think about others first rather than our own self-interest. And we make that choice. And this is, I think, another thing that causes a lot of hang-ups for people is that a lot of people have been in churches. I mean, sometimes people are just in churches for self-interest, right? So just because somebody is in a church doesn't mean that they care anything about, what the Bible says, or, have the slightest desire to seek after Christ. There's not people aren't questioned about like what they know, like they are in Afghanistan. The Taliban will stop people and make them recite prayers. I mean, there's no test of what people believe, and so people just take them at their word. But I think that part of it is a lack of sincerity, right? But the other part is that a lot of people are in churches that have taught, I really try not to bash Calvinism, but quite frankly, I think it's doctrine from the pit of hell. And I have several videos on my YouTube channel about 5 times, mostly in Arius. In Against Heresies, a lot of things he says makes it very clear that the early church would have called Calvinists heretics. I also have a couple of short clips on differences between like what Protestants and Catholics believe about like grace and salvation. And so I talk a little bit about this in there. But in Calvinism, if you just take it for where the distinctives lead, it really creates a passive faith. They believe that God decides in advance who will be saved, and you're either in or you're out. And there's nothing that you do personally that makes any difference. And that is just not true. That doesn't line up with the letters of the New Testament. It doesn't line up with that. All the warnings against falling away. It doesn't line up with the witness of the Old Testament, where God is saying life and death is before you today. Choose life. We have free will, and we can choose or not. Choose to agree with God and follow His will or not. And this is in Against Heresies. This is book 4, chapter 15, verse 2. This is showing the King James Version actually mistranslates the many are called, but few are chosen. It should be, and this this passage makes it very clear because Irenaeus was a Greek speaker. He quotes that verse, but he writes that many are called, but few, it says few chosen, but you see in the context of this is that few have chosen. And he says specifically that God has given us the right to self-government, that we do have a free will, that we do get to choose. And it's only in that, it is only that we have free will that God would be just in judging us. If we didn't actually have free will, then he couldn't judge, right? There could be no condemnation of our choices and actions if we didn't have the choice to begin with. So we're always given a choice, and we always have opportunities for not only for entering into efforts or taking a stand against things, but for building our own character. And I don't know if I have this quote, but there's a quote by C.S. Lewis. He talks about that, and where he's like, every day we have a choice to become more of a heavenly creature or more of a hellish creature. We do have that choice. And I do think that in the account, just because you have a big win at one point, it doesn't mean you stay there. You always have to continue to make those good choices and trust in God to lead you in the right path. But unfortunately, our Texas senators, they're going down a completely different path. And you'll see them post Bible verses all the time. But this is the thing. This is a Bible verse for them. It's Matthew 7:21-23. This is Jesus talking. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father. What we do actually matters. Who is in heaven? Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? I can guarantee you none of those Texas senators are doing this because they're probably going to churches that are cessationists, so they haven't even done that, so they have no business even having any thought that they're safe. Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evil doers. So that's the NIV. I looked that up. I have this app. It's super cool. You can only get it on Android. It's by Hagios Tech. It's the Hebrew Greek Interlinear Bible, and it puts the English words just right on top of the Greek. So it's really easy to see. I think get a better sense of just as close as literal as you can get when you read it that way. What the Greek actually is in there is it's those working lawlessness. And if you go in charismatic circles, a lot of times they'll talk about, spiritual strongholds in an area. There's some, if you read in the book of Daniel, it talks about the prince of Persia that was opposing actually it was Christ. It's the Lord that was coming to Daniel. He said, as soon as you started praying, he started to come, but he was opposed by the prince of Persia. So this is this principality, the spiritual principality that was over the area. It's for 21 days. And I've thought for a long time that the spiritual stronghold in the state of Texas is a spirit of lawlessness. Absolutely. And what just happened this last week in Texas is a perfect example of that. Those who are working lawlessness. When you are excusing the actions that Kim Paxton did, that verse is talking to you. As a verse is talking to you, you don't get to excuse evil and say you're on God's side. You just don't. So anyway, about opportunities, I'm going to wrap this up. But we have, I think I mentioned this last week, the crazy things. They're actually issuing Afghanistan passports at the embassy in Pakistan. It's more money than it was before, but it's not nearly as much as you would have to pay and go back to Afghanistan because nobody wants to go back there. So anyway, gotten a ton of messages from people in my group. They're like, hey, can you help us? We need money for passports for their kids, and some adults don't have passports too. So Anyway, one of the people said was he wants to not miss the opportunity because you never know with Afghanistan, Pakistan, what's going to happen next. It's crazy. Things change all the time. So we had a discussion about it on Monday, and I was telling them, okay, so let me know when because they can't even just go in and apply anymore. They have to take a number for an appointment because people from all over Pakistan are now coming to Islamabad to get to apply for passports. And so they have to even take a number to get a name or to get an appointment. So I said, take it, let me know when you go in and take your number. Let me know when you go in for your appointment, and let me know when you get your passport so we can know how long it should take. And then if somebody starts getting the runaround, then we will know how it's supposed to happen. I told them to get the names. If they start telling, and that's the other thing, people are being told different things, what they need to get the passports. A lot of chaos and confusion. I said, when they tell you, if they won't let you apply at that time, write it down, repeat it back to the person. Is this what you're understanding? Is this what I need? This is what I'm understanding you to say. And then have them sign it and get a business card if you can. I don't know if they have business cards in Pakistan, but for the Afghanistan embassy, but just get somebody's name so we can start nailing down what actually is required. So anyway, that is their opportunity that they are doing their best to take advantage of. So if you would like to help them with that, the passports are $120. There are exchange fees to get it there. So if you want to donate, you can go to DawnShireMinistries.org and select Race to Walk. But anyway, keep them all in your prayers. What else has been happening? Oh, yeah, I'm just going to show this just because. So this is a post that we're talking about the location of ISIS cells, and I think that's a good thing to just review. I hear people saying a lot of times that us pulling out, we're the ones that are the U.S. When I say we, are the ones determining whether or not there's conflict, right? If we pull out, then things just go away. And that's really ignorant as well as arrogant. If you don't understand the dynamics, then you're really going to be sitting ducks. It's like other people in other countries aren't going to stop warring against you just because you decide you want to be done. And if you don't understand that, then people saying, oh, these are the forever wars. You have to know the game that you're in, and you have to know who the players are. And this is, it's the wrong one. Where was it? It's a post by Scott Jensen. He was saying, we make these poor and ignorant decisions, and other people are bearing the cost. And that's true. And all we can hope, I think, is that we don't have another 9/11 because of our stupidity and just putting trust in the wrong people. The other thing was, this is one other story I was going to share. This is an article on The Intercept, and 2 years later that there's all these people in lily pads, the Afghans on lily pads around the world that can't even get a response to their status. Now, these are people that are actually in these centers. At least they know that their application is going to be processed. It's just taking a while. People I'm working with, they don't even have that. I mean, at least in these areas, they don't have to worry about being arrested or deported, and they have food, like the United Arab Emirates. They can't go anywhere, but at least they know. But even those people aren't getting a response. And so a few months ago, I mentioned that there was rumors of the Biden administration talking to the Philippines to be another lily pad. Why would anybody do that if we can't even get these applications processed? And there's no reason that we can't. We can do this. So anyway, just some things to keep in mind. if you hear stories coming out, do not believe anything Zalmay Khalilzad said. He is a total Taliban apologist. So anything that comes out of his mouth is a bunch of baloney. And if you hear somebody talking about open borders, they're arrogant. They're just absolutely ignorant. If there actually is open borders, and ask them to contact me at contact@racewalk.org and tell me where they are, because I have people that need some help. So anyway, hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time.